Welcome to the Open Mic Podcast Show with Mike Midgley.
Hey, and welcome to the Open Mic Podcast. On today's episode, I'm excited to be covering all things people. Yes, that's, is it a dirty word? Is either the greatest asset, either the greatest liability? We're going to get into all of that type of stuff. And I know there's differing views around that. But really, the importance about having a dedicated focus around human resources, diversity, equity and inclusion. And today's influencer is Melissa Aff, the Chief Diversity Officer at KMJJ Enterprise, based out of Alabama. Although I believe that, Melissa, today you're going to be joining us from Williamsburg in Virginia, I believe. Excellent. So KMJJ is a veteran-owned and operated business that offers talent management solutions to all businesses, focusing on helping military veterans transition into the workplace, as well as non-veterans that, just maybe had a look or struggling to find, their place and get started and with career opportunities. So in truth, whilst I personally, for the audience and for you guys who follow my stuff, they know I don't have a military background. The reality is that, when I work and coach businesses or sit on the boards, I'm seriously impressed with what I see from, ex-veterans, ex-servicemen and women coming into sort of Civvy Street. The dedication, the output, in many cases is far higher than what I see out of traditional non-veteran people. And over my career, there's sort of two people I'd like to give a shout out. First and foremost is a gentleman called Mike Gordon. Mike Gordon secured an MBE for his services in the Bosnian War as an RAF pilot. And Mike came out of the military service and actually eventually became the chief executive of one of the largest, if not the largest, private health companies in the UK, turning over $1.5 billion healthcare at home, and went on to really grow and drive that business. The second person is Gary Scott, who I employed as one of my head of sales when we were in the PLC business. Again, the discipline from Gary's RAF background. So for me, I've both worked with and employed sort of ex-veterans, ex-military people, and, been seriously impressed. So I suppose this podcast is pretty timely. It's been recorded at the beginning of June 2019, and we just celebrated the 75th anniversary of D-Day. In London last week, speaking for Digital Marketer and keynoting out there on one of their partner training days. And, we're watching the newsreels and, the sacrifices that the military people make. I just personally don't think that we do enough, whether that's to really, help them into work afterwards or just to support them in general. And I think we should do a lot more than that. And I know we heavily based around, Remembrance Day and Papa Day, but, I think this should be a year-round thing. And that's just my personal thing. I'd love to get your view on this. If you want to use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, it would be awesome to sort of, get your views on that and engage in it. And, let's see if we can, just raise the profile a little bit. And I know, Melissa's going to do that today as well and talk about a lot of things about the work and the awesome work that these guys do for ex-veterans. So welcome to the show, Melissa. I appreciate you taking the time for your busy schedule to share all the topics, human resources, diversity, equity, and inclusion today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Very excited to be here with you.
It's a pleasure. So tell me a little bit more about your backstory. I mean, when I go down, before we get into the Q&As, I looked down, some executive positions there, but sort of three sort of stints in the US Navy. I think it was 1 month short of 20 years that I counted, and from your LinkedIn profile month. So that's one hell of a commitment. And just share with us your background, how you got into the US Navy, the roles that you did, and then the moment that your background, how it's brought you to what you do at KMJJ.
So background on me. So I have over 30 years of HR experience.
Yeah.
I have never been active duty in the US Navy. I have volunteered for the US Navy. The US Navy has a program that is an official position, but it falls on the volunteer.
Yeah.
So we officially work for the commander of whether it's a captain or the officer in charge of the command, when our spouses are attached to. So it is official.
Yeah.
We sign paperwork and everything that goes into the Department of the Navy. However, we don't get paid. It's 100% volunteer.
That's a great commitment, isn't it?
Yes. So, I love it. It's amazing. So pretty much my job is as an ombudsman to be the liaison between the command captain or officer in charge to the families. There's a lot of confidentiality that is involved.
I can imagine.
Yes. I am a speaker for the Navy, so whenever we have certain, well, you can say event, we have certain events, but it's military, for the military only. Especially those prior to deployment, our spouses leaving, because they leave between 6 months to a year. So we gather and we sit down with pretty much the entire command and the family members, especially spouses, so they know what's going to happen, give them an idea how that communication is going to remain, if you will, because we can always secure that we're going to be able to connect with our spouses while they're gone, because the number one, the key, the number one that above anything is security, is the security of our military spouses while they're gone. So we have to sit tight and wait until we can hear from them.
That's and tell me that must be worrying, and not confusing. So I suppose these events that you do, where you're increasing that knowledge, I suppose you're giving them a pathway to understand the process. And would that be a fair reflection, Melissa, of so they know what's happening, they know what channels to go through, and whether they sit tight and not worry is another matter. But they at least understand the process. Would that be a fair reflection?
Sure. And one thing is, there's no worrying. My husband has been in the military for many years. And to this day, there's such a thing that I can say that I'm not worried. I'll be very sick before I take him to the ship and I see him walk on the brow and then say goodbye, because we never know. But yes, that's pretty much, how it is.
Just talk to me, and it's slightly off script here, but I really want to do this, because talk to me about the mindset that that takes, because there's a lot of things going off around mental health at the moment and things like that. And I actually interviewed an influencer called George Hodgson in the UK. He's been on BBC TV and things like that about mental health. But that's mental health in life and challenges. How much of a difference is that? When you've got a loved one in the forces, maybe serving, whether it's active or whatever. That must be a hell of a strain, and certainly in business, you get a lot of pressure. In life, you get a pressure, but that added pressure that my wife doesn't have to worry about, that type of mental pressure with me going to work, if that makes sense. Hopefully I never have to, face, the barrel of a gun or anything like that, or active combat. So just talk to me, just slightly off script here, and I apologize for that, but I'm just curious myself, and I think the listeners would be as well, before we get into the veteran stuff and the ex-servicemen. What type of extra pressure and other pressure does that put on you?
So I truly appreciate this question, because as a military couple, we go through a process before they even leave. We go through a process in which we are just mad they're leaving, and we just don't want to do anything or say anything, because we're just so mad, because we're heartbroken, because we know they're leaving. And we get to the point that we'll fine, leave. And then we forget that they're going exactly through the same thing. I'm leaving my family behind. I cannot just leave the ship and come to you whenever you need it, because it's almost like a law. Seriously, it's almost like a law. The moment they get on the ship, the car breaks down. One of the kids needs an appendectomy. The refrigerator stops working. I mean, it's like a law. They're home, nothing's happened, and then they leave and everything in the house completely falls apart. And then you have well, my spouse is not here. How am I supposed to handle all of this? It takes a lot of a person. It takes a lot of communication, and it takes a lot of resiliency to keep these marriages going. You have to have a serious commitment, and communication must be open at all times.
Thank you for that. And it's, I'm a fairly tough old boot, as I say, but I don't think I could cope with that. And I don't know if you're either that type of person or you're not. And, it's a crazy thing it's so rewarding. And I understand I was speaking with Mike and Gary, the ex-RAF people that, I work with and employ. And there just there's a way of life to them, and they get used to it. But for me, Maybe, I know what my level is, and it's not that. And so credit and hats off to you. I totally and utterly respect, that for sure. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing outside of the volunteering, the career, your skills. Obviously, I look down at the skill sets that you have, from, executive and HR, diversity, you mentioned the 30 years. So just tell us a little bit more about some of the key roles that you've held and some of the sort of key achievements that, you've brought to both your own companies and the other companies that you've worked for.
So I tell you how I got into diversity. My very first role was a receptionist in 1986 for Berlitz School of Languages.
Right.
And they never said the word diversity ever. But that is that is their foundation, diversity, because in order for you to work there as an instructor, you have to be a native of the country that language you're going to teach. Otherwise, you can't teach the language because you have to be a native. So you don't have that experience. You don't have that pronunciation. You have to live there for a long time. So I never heard the word diversity, yet they are quite diverse and quite inclusive because they all sit together and they discuss how they're going to put the curriculum together and how they teach. So that was my very first exposure to diversity, which if you hear my accent, you'll know that that's key to who I am and what I'm about. My next role actually, although was an ombudsman for the military, has always been around diversity because we have so many spouses from all over, that come together. Even when you have someone from the East Coast and someone from the West Coast in the United States, we're very different.
Cultures is different. I mean, it's really funny. It's not just the time zone. When I interview people on the East Coast, I interviewed Henry Kaminsky Jr. out of New Jersey, and Henry's an awesome guy, and I think it was about episode 18 or something like that we did with Henry. And then you interview sort of Skip Miller, one of the leading sales trainers over in San Francisco, and different people, but different lifestyles, different things. And then we did Leonard Kim a couple of weeks ago. He's like a social media influencer out of LA, and that's all the LA vibe got off with Leonard. He was awesome. He's absolutely amazing. Learned so much of Leonard. But you're right. They are different people and different characters, but it just seems that they are different countries and cultures type of play altogether. Yeah.
Very different. I had an ombudsman volunteer from New York, talks very fast, walks very fast, everything is in a hurry. And then I had the one was taking over for her from California, very laid back, girl, no need to rush, nothing's going to happen. We can do it tomorrow. Different, adorable ladies, but very, very different. And then diversity, how is that comes into play?
Do you know what? I've not actually thought about it that way. And I mean, I interview people in the UK, New Zealand, the States, which obviously, like you said, is really 3 or 4 different sort of styles. And I never thought about it that way. I'll probably be a little bit more nervous the next time I do. I've got 3 podcasts on Friday coming up, and I've got somebody in Arizona, I've got somebody on the East Coast, and then I've got somebody right up in Seattle, right up on the thing. So I'm now going to be panicking whether I should be sort of practicing. So you put the spooks up me there, but I never normally think about it. I just come in and see what the reaction of the person is, and then and try and adjust my style to drive it that way. But it is interesting, and you're absolutely right. There is such a different culture. So how does that, I suppose there's a big challenge there, and we'll get that into the questions, no doubt. But so tell us before we get into the questions, just tell us a little bit more about your career then as it brings you up to KMJJ.
After that, I tried to open my own company for a while, Translation Services.
Yep.
I was the HR director. Again, diversity at play because it was translation services, not like Berlitz, but to work on. It was pretty much for medical transcriptions and things like that. And then I had the opportunity to actually establish and support diversity at an account with IBM, which I absolutely loved. Lisa Watson, she was my mentor. I adore that lady. So supportive, so empowering. I mean, it's like the perfect, and I cannot say a boss because she was not a boss. That is the absolute perfect leader. She was amazing. And
what was it about that? Obviously, you're in and around the military sort of environment, so there's a lot of leadership, discipline, respect. to get that in, especially corporate America, you hear, and I interview a lot of entrepreneurs, trust me, they come out of corporate America, the cubicle nations, and then they run a mile from it, and things like that. So what, just for the listeners, what was it in leadership? Because I'm fascinated with leadership as a whole, just in general. What was it about her that, allows you to sort of give such kind words?
She was all about inclusion.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. She was all about inclusion, empowering, uplifting. When she called me, there was no micromanaging ever. Yeah. It was amazing. Our phone calls were like you and I talking. It was like more as in, let's go ahead and give and take. What are your thoughts about this? It was never, oh, Melissa, this is what I want, and this is it, and do it.
I think when you get a relationship like that, the trust becomes automatic. The respect becomes two-way, and non-hierarchical, and that's what I like about. And I've got a couple of relationships with my non-execs or other board members that were just exactly that. And it's difficult to describe sometimes. It just clicks, and it's boss by title more than by relationship. And I think that's what I try and deliver out. Sometimes you've got to be accountable. You've got to be accountable all the time, but sometimes we need to know what's going off. But it's about allowing people to be themselves and do good things. And I think that's it. And sounds like you certainly have that one there. And you're very, very lucky, because I think you're in the single percentile of corporate America that delivers that.
Absolutely. I mean, she was fantastic. She understood not just what the role was, but she knew what I needed to do in order for my role to be effective. Yep. And although employee engagement was not part of it, she allowed me to add that to my role in order to succeed at it. So, I mean, employee engagement is key, especially in corporate America, like you said. People talk all the time, millennials want this and millennials want that. Well, guess what? Everybody should want what millennials want, because everybody should want to be included. Everybody should want to be respected. Everybody should want to know they're making an impact at work, that we count. So that was one of the greatest positions. Not that I didn't enjoy anything in the past I have done, because I have been blessed or lucky, however you like to see it, to have had those leaders, empowering me and learning from them. But the one that will always stick with me most was her, because like I said, she allowed me to develop, into an actual diversity practitioner. And that was what actually prepared me. I worked very hard to prepare me to a role as a chief diversity officer, which is not easy to attain. This current leader that I have right now, my boss, the CEO, very inclusive. He's all about diversity, all about inclusion, hence talent agency focus in veterans and their families, because for military families, especially spouses, is very difficult to get gainful employment. They think, well, you're going to move every 2, 3, 4 years.
Yep.
No ROI. I don't going to have any return on investment on you, because you're just going to leave me after a few months. Yep. So you have a lot of spouses right now that the underemployment and unemployment for military spouses is quite high. There's no comparison to the national. Because of that, they think, well, you're not educated and you're just going to leave in a certain amount of time. I'm not going to spend my time with you. And that's not the case at all. I am very, very proud to say we have a lot of military spouses that are highly educated, past their bachelor's degree. They have actually master's degree, PhDs, and many are getting into the entrepreneurship. So it is amazing. We're seeing now spouses that are almost as accomplished or more accomplished than their military spouses.
That's amazing. And, I sort of pull a face there, in sort of horror, really, that, people, would prejudice against that, because it just seems that they're not looking at the deeper detail, and they seem to be making decisions off the surface and not the reality. And, I don't know if this is something that you've come across, but, in our world, we've got sort of three sides to our business. We've got the investment, what we do with the VCs. We have the coaching sort of element, but the core brunt of the revenue of our business, Melissa, is our agency. We're a HubSpot inbound agency, if you want to call that. And we have contractors all around the world, from South Africa to the States to Panama to things like that. And I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for the spouses who maybe do have to move around a little bit, if that is the case, because of whether they can get into the digital remote working and train that way, because it doesn't matter whether you're sat on a beach in Bali, you're in downtown New Jersey or here in the UK. You've got a laptop, and you've got a project management system, and you can work. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can work. So maybe there's an opportunity there, but yeah, it's always frustrating when I think people just sort of prejudice based off what they see initially. So, but I think that's what we're going to get onto, isn't it, really? And so tell us how you arrived there. So Chief Diversity Officer, you mentioned it's not easy to attain. Maybe is it misunderstanding? Is it just that type of role? And then just tell us how you got into KMJJ, and a little bit about what you do there. Sorry.
So to piggyback real quick of what you mentioned, I am a remote worker. Yeah. And actually, we have a military spouse who was recently featured on Forbes magazine.
Oh, wow.
Yes, she opened her own agency, and she actually hires military spouses to be virtual secretaries.
Awesome.
For other companies. So the capability is there. Not certain how much can be sustained by just the spouses, but the fact that diversity, Time's Up, and the Me Too movement have opened all of this and brought this to the attention, in so many ways to bring diversity in. I think this is going to open that niche and allow that to be more of a market availability, if you will. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, that's great. And if you want to look at more about what KMJJ do, you can visit the website at kmjjenterprise.com. We will put that in the show notes on the landing page for the podcast as well. And please do check out Melissa on LinkedIn, and you can search KMJJ Enterprise at the end of the LinkedIn URL. Again, we'll put that in the show notes. Please connect with Melissa Aff, AF as the surname. But I've got to ask, Melissa, there's a little bit of a story around that short abbreviated surname as well. You were telling me we went on live. Just tell us for the course of the recording what the full surname is.
My complete full name is Melissa Arroyo-Funderburg.
Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely, but just search Melissa Aff, AF on LinkedIn. Melissa will be delighted to connect with you. And again, on Twitter, you can do that at KMJJ_Enterprise. So please connect with these guys, especially if you're ex-military. I know Gary listens to the podcast, so I'm sure you'll be getting another follower from Gary and things like that as an ex-military. So that's cool. And as we move forward into the question sort of section, really just tap into your sort of knowledge, Melissa, and I know how passionate that you are just from speaking to you pre-show about the diversity and the inclusion. Just tell us really, just for anybody who doesn't know what KMJJ do, a mini bio about the company, who it serves, what its core value proposition is, and really why you exist, really, which I think we've got an idea, but in your own words is always better.
So KMJ actually are the initials of the CEO's children's names, which is absolutely adorable. Yeah. The CEO himself is a veteran of the U.S. military. And every person that works for the company is actually a military family member. So he is very serious when it comes to helping the military families about this.
Practicing what we're preaching here for sure.
100%. So the company is a talent agency. We submit names and find the best qualified individual and submit names to our client, and hopefully they get hired. We focus on military personnel, transitioning veterans and military spouses, DOD, and civilians as well. Yep. But we want to provide the military with those opportunities first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not easy for them. There's this stigma, that, you come out of the military and you're broken, or you don't have this, education level of education. You cannot work for corporate America. And that's not the case at all. Not every single military person, decides to not go to school. That should never be looked at it that way. To employ a veteran is one of the greatest things anybody can do. They bring so much to the table. Yeah. Diversity, number one. They don't have a choice who they work with. So they will be exposed to whoever and whatever number of individuals, regardless where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That's number one. And so they have the diversity 100% covered. When they get into the military, before they actually learn their trade, there's so much that they have to study. And they're actually subject matter experts at their rate, because everything they do is surrounding that specialty, that job specialty. Plus, on top of that, they have so many different jobs that they have to do. It's called little volunteer jobs that they do on the side, but it's actually part of their military work. So they have all these different niches, so many verticals added to their main job that they do. So they bring a lot to corporate America.
Yeah, brilliant, and it's a great, it's a great dedication. Is it just in the States that you work in, or do you do placements around the world at all? Obviously, the servicemen and women they're used to traveling around the world, aren't they? So I just wondered is it just purely US domestic, or is there opportunities for KMJJ to work in either UK or Australia or New Zealand or Europe?
So whatever positions the clients want us to fill, that's what we focus on. Right now, we have a few abroad, but not that many. Most of our positions are in the United States, but we do have some positions abroad. They will find it on our website, www.kmjenterprise.com.
That's fantastic. And if you're driving and listening and you are ex-military and you want to connect, don't worry, we'll drop these in the show notes on the channel as well, so you'll get those. So, Melissa, thanks very much indeed for giving us that backstory. I'm keen to tap into your knowledge and conscious of time as well. I sincerely appreciate the dedication that you give. It's absolutely amazing to have you on the show. So let's just dig into diversity, and things like that. So when we talk, when you approach this, the first question I suppose that I've got is, the importance of inclusion. Just talk to me about your view around that and why that's so important in today's work, and especially when you're working with the veterans and ex-military.
In my opinion, to me, you cannot have inclusion if you don't have, diversity, and you cannot have diversity if you don't have inclusion. In fact, to me, you must have inclusion before you have diversity, because having people from all aspects of from everywhere, religion, culture, gender, races, ages. If you are not willing to include them, make them part of what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. So you have to be inclusive, especially in the workplace. It's crucial to have everybody, and it's impossible, to have everybody seated at the table when you have a meeting. But if it's breaking down into, department, so that leader for that, department can sit at the table with the other one and so forth. And that's how you get the inclusivity. But a department should be inclusive of their team. Because everybody brings so many different experiences, level of education, background, beliefs. We were all raised differently. And all of that contributes to who we are today. So when we sit together, that's where the inclusion and diversity comes out.
And it starts at the top, doesn't it, in the businesses? It's got to be from the top. An old CEO, an old non-exec chairman of mine before, a guy called Bill McGraw, used to say, Mike, companies rot from the top. They're like compost heaps. They rot from the top if you don't get that. And I'm assuming that this is absolutely relevant in this case, isn't it?
Absolutely. If I don't have the support of my CEO, the diversity program will be non-existent.
Yeah.
In fact, the role of a diversity practitioner is to get themselves out of a job. The harder we work and the more we make the team diverse and inclusive, the less there is for us to do. So we have to go somewhere else and get another job. And that's what I was saying, this job is hard to find.
Yeah, it is. And, I suppose it's a bit like a football coach, eventually not that you get fired for doing bad, but you move on to a different franchise or whatever you would do, because if the work's good, you achieve it, you move on. So the art and science of recruitment, we've called the diversity and inclusion in there. I suppose that's an element of the art and science of recruitment. But in your opinion, when you work in this role, what you do at KMJJ and things like that, just talk to me a little bit more about, is it more of an art? Is it more of a science? Is it a combination? What makes it good? What makes a good recruitment sort of drive or policy or structure?
Oh, recruitment, such a bad word right now. I would say recruitment is a little bit of everything. You have to be good in sales. You have to be good with people. You have to know how to talk, how to reach people, how to get them to open up.
Yeah.
Right now, recruitment, it's sort of like I said, it's sort of a bad word, especially on LinkedIn. There's so much hate around recruitment right now because of the fear of AI and the lack of knowledge of ATS.
Yeah.
So some recruiters are amazing. They go the extra mile to get and find that I don't want to say the word perfect, but because there's no such as a perfect employee, but the best qualified candidate.
Yeah.
And then some recruiters kind of just relied on ATS completely, and we shouldn't do that. On top of that, we have to add the fact that not all of us are given the feedback that is needed. So we have that hate trend towards recruitment right now. Recruitment is hard work. You have to know the job description to post. And the thing is that the job description that we're going to post for the candidate to meet those requirements is not something that recruiters will write. It comes from the employer directly. And that's something that is not known to a lot of people and candidates. They think that it's the recruiter writing that. Well, it's not. We're posting that for the employer.
Yeah.
So
what you're saying is, whether, for the listeners who are entrepreneurs or businesses, corporates, get the job spec accurate, understand what you actually want the employees to do. Whether they're being ex-military or not is irrelevant at that sort of stage. But, it's do the groundwork, isn't it? And you got to give the recruitment company a better option to recruit and find the best candidates. And you've got to be able to allow the best candidates to step forward to say, yes, I can raise my hand, I can do that job. And I'm assuming, especially the veterans will need this as well, more than probably non-veterans. But if people see that, hey, I can see what the job is, I can see what they expect of me, do I have that skill or not, they can approach that with more confidence and go into it with all the heart. And it's a win-win situation, I'm guessing.
Well, actually, we're seeing something right now quite interesting.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of influencers telling candidates, apply for the job you want and don't worry about the requirements.
Oh, right.
Well, the requirements are there for a reason. Number one, you have to think of it as if you're the CEO of the company, will you be willing to hire someone who doesn't have the level of education or the experience that you need? Because there's some fundamentals. You have some skills that are fundamental to the job they have to do.
Yeah.
That's the reason why the employer has the requirements, because they have to ensure that they bring some of those skills. Now, that doesn't mean that someone who doesn't meet all the requirements is not going to be able to perform and actually do the job very well. That's the case. We find people out there that don't meet the requirements. But we're seeing a lot of people that have no requirements whatsoever. For example, I was talking to a colleague last week that told me we needed a subject matter expert, which is 20 years plus of experience.
Yeah.
Well, someone out of college applied. And I said, okay, so if they have some published articles, if they have done some research, if they have some substantial experience, even out of college, that they have been working on, then we can take a look at them. but we don't even get that on a cover letter. There's nothing, and sometimes not even a cover letter explaining the requirements if they meet it or not.
Wow.
So, like I said, we would be here for a day explaining how critical it is for a recruiter to get a cover letter explaining how is it that they meet the requirements, because not everything is stated on a resume. So it's not as easy, as glamorous as people make it look. It takes a lot. We have to read a lot. We have to ensure that we know the requirements and that this employee is going to be a good fit, because let me tell you, when a recruiter submits resume after resume that the person does not meet the requirements, that recruiter is either going to get fired or the agency is going to lose that client. So it's not like the recruitment doesn't know what they're doing. The recruiter they have to find the best qualified candidate for that job.
Yeah, there's challenges all around there, isn't it? And sometimes the source of the problem is direct with the people who want to hire. I get that for sure. So, we talked earlier about, especially about the inclusion, Melissa, and, we talked about it being at the top. So, the importance of having like a human resources focus. Being clear about your job roles and what you want to hire, and the skill sets is one of them. What else would you add in there for, entrepreneurs out there, and, whether, again, they're hiring military, non-military personnel? What is the keys to having, what are the steps that a business should take to make sure that they do have that human resources focus? Could you just sort of share with us your view on that as well, if you could, please?
Well, human resources is there pretty much, aside from managing the healthcare plans and development and so forth, they are responsible for company profitability. And there's something that a lot of people don't understand.
That's interesting.
They think that they're just there for training, development, and that's it. Well, that, it takes money, resources, time, to outsource, to source, to interview, to hire, to train, to develop, and to accelerate people.
Yeah, because they have a direct impact on the bottom line, is what we're saying, isn't it? It's not just about recruiting and managing grievances or with the union or anything like that. It's if I get the best people and I get the best out of them and I can take them down a track, then ultimately the bottom line is going to improve. There's a great quote by Richard Branson, the UK entrepreneur, and he says, somebody said, well, why would I train my people? And he says, well, if you train them and train them and train them, he says, wouldn't be fearful that they're going to leave. And Richard Branson says, well, if you train them and train them and train them and you look after them, why would they want to leave? You're going to get the best out of them. So, and it's a great analogy. And I don't know exactly, I probably butchered that quote a little bit, but I don't know exactly what it is, but ultimately train them and look after them and they won't want to leave. And you look at, people, like you say, of being in those type of companies that he's involved with, and those other great culture-based companies where people are 6, 10, 12, 20, 30 years in, and they don't even, I wouldn't even look for another job. It's not about the money. It's about, that work-life balance, isn't it? And, trying to get that, where, and I know Starbucks, I'm slightly off script again here, and I do that sometimes, Melissa, I apologize. The people who listen to the show know that on a regular basis, but if you look at Starbucks, their motto was always, there's 3 important places in the world. There's home, there's work, and then Starbucks in the middle. And, and that's how they position it. And, it's like, it's not quite home, it's not quite work, but it's a great place where you can do both type of thing. And ultimately, I just think that having that same culture mentality that Starbucks sort of created, is an amazing thing if you can do that. And, certainly you mentioned earlier about getting the ROI out of staff members. That ROI is going to be, paid back 6-fold, isn't it? 10-fold, 20-fold, whatever it would be if you look after them that way. So if somebody wanted to sort of, what would you pick out if somebody said, hey, is it get your culture right? Is it get your vision right? Is it something else to make sure that they have that resources focus? What would you say is the most important thing that they should sort of, double down on and get good at?
It's a combination of everything. In my opinion, culture is more at a department level than company level, because it's going to be very difficult to find someone that it just meets that cookie cutter style, if you will. And to be honest with you, as leaders, we should hire people that do not meet our culture. Yeah. We don't want the same. We want someone that has a different way of thinking, that has a different approach, that can actually take us in that innovative route that we desperately need. So when it comes to culture, for me, I would say step outside the box. Yeah. But that's me.
So, I mean, it's a great viewpoint, and the great thing about these shows, if you've got a debate on that, shoot us a message, use the hashtag #TheOpenMic, or leave us a comment on the blog or under the video below, and or connect with Melissa, and you can take that up with her directly, right, wrong, indifferent. The great thing about these shows is the influencers and the experts, these guys and gals work in this every day. They see what gets results. And, sometimes we get questions when they say, hey, I don't agree with what you said there, Mike. And say, that's fine, no problem. I'm not an authority on everything. I'm not an encyclopedia. I just have an opinion based off either personal experience or result, or sometimes I might have a different opinion if it's a different business because it's just where it is on the cycle or something. So it is. And I think that different and fresh perspective challenge is certainly very, very critical. So thanks for sharing that. And so as we sort of start to move out of the questions, just to tell us about EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity, and why that's so important. I mean, the obvious badge and badge that it sits is there, isn't it? So I don't want this to be the stupidest question of the podcast, but why is it so important, and why should it not just be given? Because I was in a boardroom 6 weeks ago, and this exact issue came up. That's why I'm going to I'm keen to learn a little bit more about this. And the CEO at the time just went, yeah, equal opportunity, yeah, that's a given. And I said, but is it? What are we doing about it? What is his approach to it? Are we just brushing it off that we must do that, or do we actually have a plan to do that? And then sort of everybody in the room looked around and said, God, we've never thought about that. It's just equal employment opportunities. Yeah, we do it. Do we? Are we focused on it? In the boardroom, maybe? What about the departments, the managers, the staff? Whoa. And then, open debate, and we probably had about a 15-minute debate about which departments could have come do it. So I'd love to learn a little bit about it from your side. So tell us a little bit more about EEO, if you could.
So in the United States, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, it pretty much enforces civil rights.
Yep.
And so a person can feel confident at work. There's not going to be any discrimination regardless of race, gender, disability, religious beliefs, and so forth. It is critical for any corporation, and it's pretty much a law. And it falls under the OFCCP, the Office Federal Contract Compliance Program. That enforces from the Department of Labor. And if a company is actually not, doesn't have a EEO specialist, which usually they don't have to, they can have actually human resources take care of that, but it has to be enforced.
Yes.
Or there can be some serious, legal issues, horrific lawsuits. That's something I just go, nope, please, let's go ahead and stay focused on this at all times to avoid, possible lawsuits, because no one should feel discriminated at work because they're a woman, because they're disabled, or, because of their background.
Yeah, and it's really funny. And the part that I didn't tell you about the meeting I had, and thanks for sharing that, is when I said to them, so do we have an equal opportunities policy? And they couldn't produce one. I said, well, we don't have one. It's not difficult to produce. Obviously, there is templates here in the UK that give you baselines against the law that you can, maybe manipulate's the wrong word, but customize to your own company about but the core, the core rules and legislation stay, but you can then customize the template is what I'm saying. So, if you're an employer and you don't have an equal opportunities, policy, then, it's something that's part of corporate governance, just making sure that you're running the business the right way. And in Malaysia, is that something that's law in the US, that they've got to have that as part of their, compliance policies, or is it optional for businesses of a certain size?
No. It is compliance. It's comply with the Department of Labor, which, it's a law. Now, they don't have to have an equal opportunity specialist
Yeah.
The human resources department can take care of that. But if the company, the organization is big enough to have a specialist, will be even better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important. So, if you're not sure, go and speak to the person who looks after your compliance, go to HR. If you're not sure, but by all means, make sure you get a copy of that, or check your company handbook or employee handbook or whatever that may be. So as we wrap out on the questions, the final question that we've got is, tell me more about the ADA. Now, this is specific to the American and the US domestic market than it is here. What I'm going to do a little bit more research for the UK and Europe audiences as well. And I know we have a Disability Act here in the UK, but from the US domestic side, Melissa, tell me about the ADA, the American Disability Act, and your approach to that, and I'm assuming that would also come in if we're trying to place veterans that's maybe been injured in active service and things like that. So tell us a little bit more about that, and what people should be mindful of.
That American Disabilities Act was enacted in 1990, and I think it's one of the most crucial and greatest things the United States of America has ever done, because not every disability is visible.
Yep, absolutely.
And you have people that, you see them walking and speaking and functioning perfectly. That doesn't mean that there is something else that is, that it falls under a disability. So that is one of the greatest things that we could have ever done, especially when it comes to protected veterans.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see evidence that they do discriminate against disabled or injured veterans? Do you see that as much, or do they brush it away? Are they dedicated to it? What's your experience when recruiting and working against this act?
So for the most part, veterans and pretty much everybody else, they're very open when it comes to that, and said, I have a disability, so I fall under the ADA and so forth. So they're very good. In the past, people didn't want to say anything about it because they thought there's going to be this stigma that I cannot perform the job. But now, because those laws are in place and they're to protect the employee, they're more open about it. And we hear from the very beginning, as soon as we start the interview process, they tell us on the spot, I do have a disability, and I do need certain things in place for me to perform the job, which is great. We actually have that in our application. Yeah,
that's awesome. And just a quick one here, Melissa. I saw on Sky News a documentary about, I think it was probably Q1 this year, and they were all doing about the disabilities. There was interviewing this teenage girl. She was 19 years old. She wasn't a veteran or anything like that. She's 19 years old. But what brings home, and I want all the audience, if you're an employer, I want you to think deep about this, because it's related to what Melissa's brought up, which is a great point. The Sky News report was that this lady, she was 19, and she was talking about the issues that she faced about the non-visible disabilities that you touched on. And I hadn't prepared on this. It's just come back in my mind, so I'm shooting a little bit from the hip. And the abuse that she actually got, she was actually queuing outside of a disabled toilet. And she's queuing outside of a disabled toilet. She eventually goes into the disabled toilet. And when she comes out, because she's sort of a little bit fashionable, if you want to call it that, and 19 years old, the abuse that she got when she came out from people, you shouldn't be using the disabled toilet, blah, 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 blah. And the lady actually had a colostomy bag on, and, she had to go in, and she felt uncomfortable, but she was, and Sky did a great documentary about raising that. So that's a public experience, or, humiliation or whatever an abuse that she necessarily had to face. But I'm sure that that's evident again in the workplace. So, if you are employing people, see past that. Just because this lady was 19 and she wanted to use the disabled, she wasn't trying to shortcut it, trying to cut the queue. She had a genuine reason. And, the girl's in tears, doing the interview, and she gets it all the time. And, because it's not visible, people assume or presume. And, slightly different example, but, no doubt, that discrimination, you do see in the workplace sometimes, and it's awfully wrong, and so it's about being mindful of it. And just because the disabled or disability related, it doesn't mean to say, like you said, Melissa, that they either can't do the job or can't do the job better, because they're very resourceful, and And you know, I felt pretty sick about that documentary, that, you know, people do that. And I know as people that we judge, and we shouldn't, but there's a great saying, isn't there, about don't judge a book by its cover, but, you know, respectfully, people do, don't there? And so, you know, what piece of advice would you give to employees? You know, and I know there's an act there, both in the States, and there's the Disability Act here in the UK. But what would you say to people, you know, about that? Because I don't think anybody intentionally goes in to discriminate, but, you know, whether it's, do you think that's a culture thing that they do? Do you think that they think that it's more hassle? You know, what is there any myths that we could bust out here, Melissa, for people to sort of, you know, focus and double down on the disability stuff, that and see the benefits of employing people with disabilities?
Actually, that falls under, you know, our prejudice, because we have conscious and unconscious biases, and we have this preconceived notion that we believe that if we see or hear the word disable, somebody's going to come out with a wheelchair or walking a dog, and that's not the case. We have to be more empathetic. We have to be more cognizant to the fact that not every disability is visible. We have to be very cautious about how we react and be a little more open-minded. You know, we have to actually fine-tune our lenses, if you will, to go past that. We have to make it conscious. We have to be very conscious about our biases, unconscious and unconscious biases, and we really have to do better when it comes to, you know, making just judgments as soon as we see someone, and give them the benefit of the doubt. Like you said, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, absolutely, and rightly so, and well said, and certainly endorse that. So sharpen up, guys. You know, nobody goes out to break the law or do it intentionally, but, you know, maybe think before you speak, or, you know, try and work a situation out, or ask a question before being judgmental for certain. That would certainly be a good play. So, Melissa, I sincerely appreciate your time today. I think the value that you brought is immense. Thank you very much indeed. I've really enjoyed learning about, you know, the great work that you're doing at KMJJ, not only for veterans, but for other people as well. And again, if you want to visit these guys, you can get them on Twitter at KMJJ_Enterprise. Facebook, KMJJ Enterprise, after Facebook.com, of course. Search Melissa AF on LinkedIn, or visit them online, and you can do that at KMJJEnterprise.com. So, Melissa, if we could summarize up, and I know there's so much to deal with, from diversity, from inclusion, from equality, from equity, all that type of thing. If we could sum up, you know, for the UK audience, the American audience, the entrepreneurs out there who are recruiting and employing and wanting to get the best ROI out of the staff and create awesome environments, if we could sort of give 3 tips to sort of essentials that they absolutely must do as expected value, what would you say those would be?
I'm actually going to tell something that Verna Myers, she is an excellent diversity practitioner. She said, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to the dance floor, if you will. And I don't think anybody can say that better than her, because it's true. You know, you cannot have a group of people just from all, you know, sorts of the world, and just have them standing there and not do anything at all. You know, if we're going to do that, then let's go all the way.
Perfect.
You know, when it comes to veterans, you know, veterans can do a lot. They bring a lot to the table. They're very smart. They are all about their country, and not just for the military, but they love their country. Not everybody join because they wanted just to serve in the military. Some join to travel the world. Some join, you know, to get in a train. But at the end of the day, they decide to stay because it's their love for their country that keeps them there. So give them a chance. You as veterans are amazing people. You know, they bring a lot to the table.
Definitely.
And when it comes to civil rights, it serves no purpose to us to go back prior to the civil rights movement. You know, we have accomplished so much, and the only way we're going to go and move forward and make everything easier for everyone, and bring this world together, it's being open to diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely, and very well said. And congratulations again for the work that you do. Having looked at the research prior to the podcast, I can see the dedication, you've niched down on that. And I'm sure that, the veterans are going to get a great deal of value from, working with you guys and, maybe just help them transition back into that if that's, when they decide to come out or whatever it would be. So thanks ever so much for being on the show, Melissa. I've sincerely enjoyed speaking to you, learning from you as well. Some great points there. My show book, I've got plenty of notes here. I'll be writing those up and getting them done. Again, you can connect with KMJJ on social media. Just search that there or visit the website at kmjjenterprise.com. So we appreciate you being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks again, Melissa. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it.
So do I.
Fantastic, guys. So think about your HR policies. HR, I only joke about it. People can your biggest asset or your biggest liability. But if you recruit right, train right, develop right, look after your people right, especially the veterans, you're going to get a lot better return and your business is going to move and your bottom line is going to improve. So thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate you joining us and continuing your growth engine development. As always, get in the game, go do the hustle, go make it happen. And we're going to see you on the next show real soon.
You have been listening to The Open Mic, brought to you by The Success Hub. To find out more and to get the resources we have mentioned in this podcast episode, simply visit blog.thesuccesshub.io and view the podcast section. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you in our next episode. This podcast and associated materials is published under copyright to The Success Hub. All rights reserved. No reproduction of this material is permitted.